Whether it's the microtransaction fiesta of South Korean MMOs or the steaming pile of Eurojank shooters out there, there's something to be said about where a developer hails from and how their culture impacts their games. In that regard, you can leave it to the finish to crank out the gaming equivalent of distilled masochism between bouts of depression and binge drinking. I mean, hey, I'd be miserable too if I had to live through the Arctic winter. And what better way to process that sweet, sweet dread than to make a game and share it with the world? Enter Fear and Hunger, a survival horror JRPG by indie developer and probable deviant Miro Havarinen, and the person responsible for my most recent gaming obsession. In this video, I'm going to analyze Fear and Hunger through the lens of cosmic horror, taking a brief look at the weird fiction of H.P. Lovecraft and the themes of his stories, and how they are referenced and explored within the game, with some musings of my own regarding the cosmic horror subgenre. I'm aware that this type of video is scarcely related to my previous two D&D folklore-centric videos, so hopefully I don't alienate the mob of eager attendees on this one. Oh, and another thing of note. This game's pretty fucked up. I mean, it's got a lot of really graphic and sensitive, potentially triggering content in it, so in all seriousness, if depictions of blood and gore, violence against children, and sexual assault are too much for you to stomach, please feel free to click off the video and stay away from the game. With that little prelude out of the way, let's jump into this old family-friendly classic. Upon starting a new game, you'll be prompted to choose between one of 4 playable characters. In old-school JRPG fashion, you can name these characters whatever you want, but since those you don't choose will also be in the dungeon during your game, we know their canonical names to be Kahara, Darce, Enki, and Ragnvaldr, respectively. These 4 have come to the dungeons to find the legendary mercenary captain, Lagarde, and each of them are driven by their own distinct motivations. Each character begins the game with their own unique loadout of skills and equipment, determined by a brief choose-your-own-adventure style introductory segment detailing their backstory. Kahara's motivations are primarily material, and this is reflected in his skill set. His lockpicking ability lets him open up certain doors other characters would have to pass up, and his talents as a pickpocket and escape artist make him adept at pilfering the purses of enemies before scurrying away into the distance. Like a D&D rogue, Kahara is best played as an absolute rat bastard, laying traps and setting up ambushes while fleeing from anything resembling a fair fight. Darce is our budget Casca. Having led a life of honor as a knight, she comes to the dungeon with arguably the best starting kit, and is a good choice for players seeking to hold their own in honest combat. Though I'm gonna be honest with you, that's kind of a shit idea. She has come to the dungeons to save her former captain and unrequited lover, a motivation which may put her at odds with a certain neck-snapping outlander. Enki is a frail and gaunt figure, with a predilection for zealotry and a history of sororicide. While he's utter dog shit in a straight-up melee, with some necromantic magic and a bit of luck, he can have an army of shambling corpses to serve as his black metal bandmates in no time. Guts? Wait, no. Simon Belmont? Wait, no. Ragnvaldr is a hardened Northman from the far-off lands of Oldegard. His quest is one of vengeance, seeking to slay the mercenary captain Lagarde, who massacred Ragnvaldr's tribe and slew his wife and son in order to acquire an artifact of ancient power. He is the most physically imposing character of the 4, able to enter a berserker-like battle rage, which further boosts his already impressive strength. If that's not quite your thing, you can always make him eat corpses instead. Regardless of your starting character and the skills you've chosen, you'll swiftly come to the realization that nothing could have really prepared you for the dungeons of Fear and Hunger.
What the hell is even that?
Assuming you don't dilly-dally too much outside, rummaging through bins like a trash panda and get your face gnawed off by a pack of wild dogs, you'll soon begin to understand why this wretched place is named as it is. It is dark. It is spoopy. And you're gonna get hungy very quickly down here. Survival is not just a matter of keeping your character healthy. Beyond the responsibility of keeping your blood inside you and your limbs attached, you'll also have to care for your nutritional needs and mental health. Hunger is pretty straightforward. If knowing when to eat confuses you, you're worse than my chonky-ass cat. I fed you, dude. You ate, like 20 minutes ago. You ate! Stop! Your character's mind serves as the general approximation of their mental composure and sanity. It also serves as a resource for casting spells, similar to the Call of Cthulhu tabletop role-playing game. Should it drop too low, your character will develop panophobia, a fear of everything, drastically reducing their effectiveness in combat and exacerbating the issue of their already dwindling sanity.
I'm feeling less stable.
For most people, that right there is enough to make Fear and Hunger a cosmic or Lovecraftian horror game. Plenty of other games considered a part of the subgenre also utilize a sort of sanity meter to quantify and display the information of the player's mental state. But simply quantifying a character's mental state does not a cosmic horror make. You can't just slap a sanity meter onto your game and call it a cosmic horror.
Nice.
It's about the themes. So what exactly are those themes? And what exactly is cosmic horror? For those unfamiliar, the cosmic horror subgenre finds its origins within the works of Howard Phillips Lovecraft. The hallmark of Lovecraft's writing is his literary philosophy of cosmicism, the view that the universe as a whole is entirely unknowable to humanity, and the fear born out of our insignificance in the uncaring void of space, and the inability of the human mind to comprehend its scale is the primary theme of his horror. Though Lovecraft's stories often deal with concepts and creatures beyond comprehension, they nevertheless provoke a kind of instinctual fear, a horror our animal brains are able to identify even without entirely understanding the source. The all-important atmosphere which makes up an effective cosmic horror is the rousing of those physiological remnants of our ancient instincts. The same fear which the mysterious thunder struck within our ancestors invoked in the modern man's reeling in the wake of unplumbed cosmic mysteries. This sentiment is typically summarized as the fear of the unknown. The uniqueness of cosmic horror lies in its transcendence of understood human experience. A certain atmosphere of breathless and unexplainable dread of outer, unknown forces is present, and a particular suspension or defeat of those fixed laws of nature which humans rely upon to develop their mental models of the universe leave the subjects of cosmic horror disoriented, confused, and ultimately terrified. There is an implication, or rather, a revelation, that there is, in existence, an entity or state of being which highlights the limits of our own puny monkey brain's ability to understand the unquantifiable vastness of the cosmos. Cosmicism, in many ways, was born out of Lovecraft's own feelings of existential dread. Human beings in Lovecraft's works are portrayed as subjects to the whims of forces beyond their understanding and control. Humanity as a whole is typically depicted as ignorant of the existence of these forces. Individuals lead their lives with total assurance that they are free agents with an identity or a selfdom. It is the role of Lovecraft's narrator protagonists to dispel this belief, and to stress humanity's lack of importance as a species on a cosmic scale. The sad irony is that many of these narrators are unable to share their story with the world, as they are often driven to madness before their warnings can be heeded. Lovecraft's stories are often written in a manner analogous to a found footage film, a letter or a journal from a primary narrator who has since died or disappeared by the time you, the reader, have finished the story and inherited their knowledge of the horrible truth. His works often include elements of science fiction, and the protagonist narrators of Lovecraft's stories are typically fatally curious investigators or intrepid researchers delving into subjects unknown. Their folly serves as a warning against the unmitigated advancement of human progress. Lovecraft himself personally saw unrestricted scientific development as a dangerous practice, potentially resulting in the uncovering of a truth too vast and too dangerous to ignore once revealed. There is a sort of delved too deep theme at play, an awakening of things best left to lie undisturbed. This theme is embodied by Lovecraft's Great Old Ones and Elder Gods, extraterrestrial entities of an unfathomable scale and incomprehensible intelligence, which lie in a state of slumber, with the end of their hibernation being equated to an apocalyptic event. Cthulhu, perhaps Lovecraft's most well-known entity, and the namesake of his mythos, is said to lie dreaming within the depths of the sunken city R'lyeh, located near the Pacific Point of Isolation, the coordinate within the Pacific Ocean which is most distant from a coastline in any which direction. The vastness of such open waters is itself a kind of unknowable cosmos. Seriously, some of these deep-sea fish may as well be aliens. Cthulhu's return from that depth of uncountable fathoms heralds the end of humanity on this earth, and the return of the old gods to power on the planet. What's important to stress here is that Cthulhu's awakening, and the subsequent doom of mankind, is not an act of maliciousness. The Elder Gods harbor no ill will to humanity, for they do not even stop to consider humanity in the first place. They are simply indifferent to us. By way of analogy, contemplate how long you've been alive. Consider the walks you've taken, the bike rides, the road trips. Think about the concerns you had at those moments. You had to get to work on time. You had to make sure not to drop the bag of sweets and your copy of Crash Bash you were bringing over to your buddy's place. You had to buy gas and plan out your day when you got to your first vacation spot. During all of this, ponder for a moment. How many weeds did you step on? How many worms forced from the earth by the rain did you bisect with your front tire? How many countless insects were pulverized by your car's windshield? None of these many casualties were a result of a malicious motivation. They were simply things that were in the way, snuffed from existence by a human who is absent-mindedly going about their day. Cosmic indifference is about applying humanity's attitudes towards things we see as beneath consideration to ourselves. The Outer Gods, while a threat to humanity, are not actively seeking out the destruction of our species. Our destruction is simply an inevitable side effect of a great plan we are not privy to. In a way, Lovecraft treated fear as a kind of character. Not a concept, but an entity. In a similar vein, the dark influence stemming from the depths of the dungeons of fear and hunger seems to work with an intention in mind. It's not so much a natural phenomenon as it is a force, which acts in accordance with a will. It drains the life from those within the dungeon's walls, sapping their strength and shattering their sanity. Those that die of starvation or from the varied traps and monsters can be considered lucky, as those that have their mind broken by the dungeon seem to twist and mutate, molded by the grip of some mysterious force into pallid abominations of their former selves. It is this latter fate which has befallen the old prison guards, who will likely be your first encounter within the dungeons of fear and hunger. Combat is relatively simple. Everything is turn-based, and like a typical JRPG, players can attack, use abilities, consume items, or flee from battle. The standout mechanic of Fear and Hunger is its D&D-esque called shot system, allowing for the strategic targeting and dismemberment of enemy limbs. Dude's got a giant cleaver? Cut that arm off so he can't use it. Too tall to reliably attack its head? Hack him down to size before swinging for the neck. The caveat is that this works both ways, and enemies will often dismember or decapitate your character with a single attack. Combat is a high-risk, low-reward endeavor. Even with a good battle plan, a low roll of the dice or a string of bad luck can cost you your limbs or your life. The coin flip is Fear and Hunger's other mechanic, and is arguably its most salient. Certain attacks from enemies will prompt the player to call either heads or tails. Get it right, and you'll evade the attack. Get it wrong, well... The brutality of Fear and Hunger's combat and the many game overs that stem from approaching it like a typical JRPG should serve as a lesson. You are not special. You're not a heroic battle-hardened warrior with plot armor and a special destiny. You're a self-serving doofus way in over your head, and you should be deeply regretting ever coming here. A lot like IRL, it just isn't worth getting into a fight, as the permanent damage sustained from such an encounter only makes the rest of one's life more difficult to lead. And on top of that, there's little to no material reward to be gained, and the typical JRPG accumulation of experience points is completely absent in Fear and Hunger. So why fight anything at all? Good question. Don't. Even if you beat a guard without losing a limb, or slay a Maneba and don't end up injected with tapeworms, the loss of a single point of health will weigh heavily on you. Healing items are few and far between, and any time spent scouring bins and gardens for potions and herbs is time spent rapidly starving to death. Getting into unnecessary fights only serves to spend time you don't have and consume resources you desperately need. Fans of survival horror games will be familiar with this kind of gameplay. Whether it's the magic V8 health drinks of various Silent Hills, or the development of your own personal armory in Resident Evil, survival horrors can be simplified down into a singular concept: resource management. Fear and Hunger is no different. Your party menu will display the status of your character, each meter a dwindling gauge representing the various ways the game is going to fuck you over. It's a challenge just to reliably satisfy your lowest level needs. Food, drink, and a safe place to take shelter and save your game is never promised to you, and you'll often be lacking in what you most need at the moment. The constant scavenging and scurrying reduces you to the mental state of a prey animal, clinging to life with an ever-weakening grip. There is a primal fear at play in this kind of game loop, something rooted within the reptilian depths of our brains which serves to equate the player to lower animals which humans typically deem as unworthy of consideration. Our human protagonists are knocked off the top of the food chain, and must struggle for their own meals just as hard as they have to struggle to avoid becoming something else's. Stockpiling curatives in the event of an emergency and ensuring you have enough food to not wither and die on the vine are crucial, time-sensitive tasks limited by your other main resource: torches. Simply put, your ability to explore the dungeons is predicated on your ability to see where the fuck you're going. In lacking a source of light, the screen is quite literally black, and you'll be fumbling about on your arrow keys just praying to stumble into a candle or a door that leads outside. The longer you're stuck in the dark, the more your sanity will deplete, and although your mind can be replenished by imbibing alcohol, or having a cheeky hit of the crack pipe, the darkness isn't going anywhere, and without a flame to keep it at bay, you'll always be struggling to maintain your grip on reality. This balancing act of Fear and Hunger's resource management is emblematic of another of cosmic horror's themes: entropy. If the dungeon is the indifferent universe your character exists within, it is rapidly approaching heat death. Each resource you consume to keep yourself in the fight for a moment longer is a resource you'll never get back. It is absolutely possible to softlock yourself when playing this game, and be unable to progress any further simply because there's nothing left to sustain you. Any brief moment of triumph or excess of resources will inevitably be balanced by your shit getting kicked in, or by getting lost in the winding corridors and burning through too many torches and clumps of moldy bread for little gain. You can never really get ahead of Fear and Hunger. You don't win in a cosmic horror. You only ever hope to hold the line. Adopting this self-preservationist mentality is damn near a requirement to advance beyond the first levels of the game, And while the horrors encountered thus far have been many and have been punishing, they are, at least, understandable. Feelings of hunger are something that all humans can relate to, and most encounters pit you against monstrous humanoids, twisted in form and scale to be sure, but doubtlessly recognizable as having the same violent and perverse tendencies exhibited by our species.
You look like a cut of fuckable meat, are you?
The dungeon, though confusing, is built by mortal hands, and has the typical Euclidean structure one would expect. Sure, everything here is scary, but it's at least comprehensible. Would be a shame if things got more confusing, right? In the gore-caked hallways of the dungeon's blood pit lies an elevator cabin, controlled by a lever elsewhere within the prison's complex. Patrolling this area is a lizardfolk warrior, a member of an ancient species which long predates humanity's reign of the surface world. Though one may initially not give this beast much thought, it serves as a prescient warning to any adventurer seeking to delve deeper within the dungeon. You're not the first ones to come here, and judging by that elevator presumably not being used to get anyone back up here, whatever lurks below is likely just as, if not more dangerous than what you've encountered thus far. Stepping off of the elevator, we find ourselves within a natural cave system. The darkness is as oppressive as ever down here, and a multitude of monstrous forms flutter above the bottomless chasms. As usual, these enemies are best avoided. Except for Moonless, of course. Further in, several poorly maintained tunnels and stretches of track can be seen, suggesting that the caves have been used as a mining site in the past. But why build a mine under a prison? And what exactly were they digging for? There doesn't appear to be any traces of precious gems or minerals of industrial utility. Only carts, filled to the brim with chunks of stone. Perhaps they sought something deeper. You may be tempted to stop and ponder the purpose of this place, but your grumbling belly and an ominous sound remind you to keep pushing forward, letting the questions rest at the back of your mind. Besides, what does it matter? Whatever the previous inhabitants were looking for, it's clear that their search did not go according to plan. The spirits of the long dead haunt the mines, and human remains can be found within the caved-in sections of its branching paths. If you don't want to join them, you better get moving. Up ahead, amongst the powdered bones of the long dead, is a strange dancing man, clad in bright yellow robes. Unlike the monsters of the dungeon's first floors, this cavorting cultist is capable of severing your limbs out of combat, and is one of the few threats you will be forced to engage with if you wish to avoid permanent damage. Fortunately, with his left leg destroyed and his free hand severed, the cultist poses no threat, and they can either be safely finished off or spoken to. Inquiring about the mysterious figure's divine patron provides us with a name: Grow-Garoth, the name of the old god associated with destruction. This utterance, along with certain holy texts you may have randomly found by now amongst the dungeon's varied containers, serves as the first allusion to beings of ancient power on a cosmic scale. The world of Fear and Hunger has no singular unified faith. Rather, several gods, both old and new, are venerated by various distinct in-world cultures. Of these divine beings, the old god Grow-Garoth predates creation. His disciples, like the figure in yellow, practice eldritch blood magics which can raise the dead, or sever limbs and spill blood in his name.
Blood for the blood god! Blood for the blood god! Blood for the blood god!
If the dancing man is asked to divulge his secrets and teach us the magics of Grow-Garoth, he will refuse, explaining that we must seek out his master, the dread wizard Nas'Hara, before providing us with an item, the Eclipse Talisman. Aside from pursuing a career as a Grow-Garoth cultist, the only other way of learning blood magics, assuming you did not begin the game as Enki, is to acquire the item referred to in-game as the Ancient Book, an esoteric tome authored by scholars unknown, which teaches the player a random skill associated with Grogorath's magic, assuming of course that they are able to decipher the text without losing their minds. Attempting to read from the tome's pages will prompt a coin flip, which, if failed, will result in a game over, as the player character is driven to inescapable madness. The Ancient Book draws direct inspiration from H.P. Lovecraft's fictional grimoire, the Necronomicon, an occult tome containing various accounts of the Old Ones, their history, and the means for summoning them. Much like Lovecraft's fabled original, Fear and Hunger's rendition of the Necronomicon contains the history and details surrounding the old god Grogorath, and instructions for casting various spells which fall under his domain. The new god Nasra, the master of the cult of Yellow Mages, is himself an extremely powerful wizard, well versed in this kind of eldritch magic, and serves as a reference to the purported author of Lovecraft's Necronomicon, the mad Arab Abdul al-Hazred. The Yellow Mages which follow Nasra's teachings and worship Grogorath are depicted as wearing a style of clothing which appears to be a hybridization of African and Arabic styles, likely in reference to al-Hazred's heritage. Even the color of their robes, and the robes of other figures within the game, is in reference to weird fiction and cosmic horror, specifically Robert W. Chambers' The King in Yellow, which heavily influenced Lovecraft's own Cthulhu mythos and is often a recurring motif of occult literature within his works. But the Yellow Mages are not the only worshippers of eldritch beings to be found within the dungeon. Though cult activity is not a theme strictly exclusive to cosmic horror, Lovecraft's works, and the games and films based off of them, typically employ a sort of 80s satanic panic-esque caricature of occult activities, and Fear and Hunger has its fair share of dark magic rituals to go around. In addition to the Yellow Mages, a gathering of wolf masks can be found within the mines. Half-naked humans clad in furs, engaging in a feast of blood and body parts, cannibalizing their congregation in a trance-like frenzy. Though the sight would alarm anyone of sane mind, the wolf masks are not hostile, and in fact invite the player to join them in their so-called celebration of flesh. In doing so, the player will be able to restore their hunger meter to its fullest. Partaking a second time, however, will prompt a coin flip, which, when failed, will drive your character into the same trance-like state as the wolf masks, robbing them of their free will and resulting in a game over. On the surface, a similar congregation can be found in the gardens wearing bunny masks, indicative of the form their ritual takes. Nasra, his Yellow Mages, and the various cults to the old gods are not the only elements of Fear and Hunger which have direct parallels to Lovecraft's works. Pushing deeper into the mines, we come across Darce, being assaulted by some strange subterranean humanoids. If left unassisted, Darce will be bludgeoned to death by one of the creatures. By intervening, she can be recruited, though the creatures will turn hostile. The Cavedwellers hail from their nearby village, a collection of hollowed-out stone huts centered around a loosely organized village square. Barring the contents of their singular merchant's inventory, the only item of any value within the village lies upon an altar in one of the huts. The Cube of the Depths, an eldritch artifact originating from the far-off continent of Vinland, is considered a sacred relic to the cave-dwellers due to its association with the God of the Depths, a gargantuan, primordial being affiliated with insects, rodents, pests, feelings of revulsion, and inescapable darkness. The cave-dwellers are amongst its mindless servants. This isolated community and the hostility of its inhabitants towards outsiders is emblematic of Lovecraft's fictional town of Innsmouth, Massachusetts, a backwater coastal town which acts as the set piece in his short story, The Shadow over Innsmouth. Much like the unnerving and uncanny resemblance Fear and Hunger's cave-dwellers have to humans, the people of Innsmouth are known for possessing a certain set of disturbing physical qualities. Their worship of and crossbreeding with their Deep One allies manifests as several ichthyic characteristics referred to as the Innsmouth look. Sunken cheeks, flabby skin, bulging eyes, and swollen lips, features which become more and more pronounced as the human-fish hybrids mature, ultimately resulting in their complete transformation and return to the depths of the ocean. North of the Cavedweller village, the slumbering old god can be seen hovering above a fathomless pit. The old god's dreadful influence, and the cave dwellers' proximity to it, is likely the cause for their unique physiology, suggesting a humanoid lineage twisted by the umbral influence of their divine master, much like the influence of the esoteric order of Dagon upon the citizens of Innsmouth. By this time, the initial body horror of Fear and Hunger has peeled back to reveal something greater. Ancient texts of occultic magic, long-hidden creatures of uncanny forms, eldritch artifacts of immense power, and a literal old god all suggest that something greater lies within the depths of the dungeon's darkest reaches. A daunting consideration made even more impactful due to the game's prior emphasis on primal terror. Up until this point, the threats present within the game have been, shall we say, mundane. Hunger is an earthly concern, and the terror which comes from being chased by monstrous escapees of horny jail is comparable to a hunt, one animal stalking another for food, or the fulfillment of other selfish desires. The prey animal state the player has been reduced to by this kind of horror fosters a mentality of helplessness and vulnerability, which serves to further heighten the intensity of the discovery of elder gods, beings which not only transcend the earthly concerns we are shackled by, but are likely the creators and bearers of the metaphorical lock and key which limits the scope of our minuscule mortal lives. The revelations presented to us by the creatures and cultists of this strange cavern serve as food for thought as we continue our descent even further downwards, into the final level of the prisons of the dungeons of Fear and Hunger. The winding narrow corridors of the Catacombs are a strange fusion between the architecture of the prisons above and something more ancient. Strange totemic pillars stand crooked, or lay toppled, upon the mass of writhing insects which make up the floor. An old ritual circle can be found in a side room, and an engraving depicting what appears to be an ancient city rests faded upon the timeless stone walls, flanked by two effigies from a bygone era. The most alarmingly alien feature of this quasi-comprehensible place is a throbbing, writhing purple mass, a strange and hideous hunk of flesh, pulsing with an otherworldly light to the rhythm of the methodical beating of a disembodied heart. The countless swarms crunch and split under the weight of each cautious step forward towards the solitary cells at the back of the hallway, wherein we find the object of our ill-fated expedition. But it is little too late. Here in the lonely black lies the bloodied and emaciated corpse of the mercenary captain, Lagarde. Pretty depressing shit. It's worth noting that outside of the game's hard mode, it's entirely possible to arrive at this point with Lagarde still alive. As long as the total time on your save file is under 30 minutes, Lagarde will still be breathing, and will even be recruitable assuming your current party size is under 4 total members. Though, in not bringing him, Doris will leave your party and stay with him to simp full time. And although the open-ended nature of Fear and Hunger's storytelling at one time allowed for this story element to be considered, the release of Fear and Hunger's sequel all but confirms that Lagarde was found dead within this cell. If you're interested in the particulars of Fear and Hunger lore, and the lore of its sequel, Termina, I highly recommend checking out YouTuber Wormgirl's video on the subject, which breaks down in detail the reasons for this being the case. For the purposes of our current discussion, we will presume Lagarde to be dead at this point in time. And really, could it be any more perfectly bleak? I mean, here you've been playing through this brutally difficult game, struggling inch by inch and using the knowledge of dozens of failed playthroughs to reach this point, and it was entirely meaningless. The ennui is fucking delicious, And this atmosphere of hopelessness is so emblematic of cosmic horror that it can only really be matched by another of Lovecraft's themes. Remember the mines? What the hell are they even digging for? What's with this ancient city? Strange to see that on the walls down here. Curious about these weird totems which by now serve no functional architectural purpose? Who even built this place? These environmental storytelling elements, paired with our prior discovery of the existence of primordial powers, hint at something far greater in scope than our little rescue quest. The Cube of the Depths, aka that weird thing we found by the stanky mouth upstairs, is far more than just an item of worship for acolytes of the God of the Depths. It is a key, capable of unlocking doors both spatial and temporal, and such a gateway can be found on this floor to the north. A monolithic door bearing masterwork carvings looms over the forgotten depths of these cursed catacombs, and upon its face is a four-sided slot perfectly suited to accepting the Cube of the Depths. Slap that bad boy in there, and the gates open, revealing the long untread Tomb of the Gods beyond. You just have to ask yourself one question now. Do you delve deeper? At this point, it's perfectly acceptable to take a look at Lagarde's freshly slit throat and conclude that this place is cursed, throwing up your hands and uttering an exhausted "fuck it, I'm out" before taking the stairwell upstairs and backtracking your way out of the dungeon. Doing so leads to the game's escape ending, in which the protagonists flee with their lives, but are doomed to carry the trauma and horror of all they've seen until the end of their days. Like Lovecraft's narrator protagonists, the horrors experienced cannot be forgotten, and the shackles the dungeon's malefic energies have coiled around our characters' souls will never loosen, burdening them with a constant struggle against ever-encroaching madness as they relive the moments no mortal should ever bear witness to. Physically, they may return home. Mentally, they may as well be in that same cell with Lagarde. The only true way to escape the dungeon is to give in to the fatal curiosity which so often serves as the source of doom for the subjects of cosmic horror, to attempt to answer the questions pawing at the back of our freshly mind-fucked skulls and pursue the trail of mystery into the darkness. In spite of the fear of the unknown, we press on and enter the Tomb of the Gods. The Tomb of the Gods is unlike anything witnessed thus far in the dungeons of Fear and Hunger, and likely unlike anything the characters have witnessed in their respective home cities. The Cyclopean stonework is emblematic of some long-extinct culture, and ancient niches housing the bones of the long dead line the walls of the crypt. Towering on either side of the sepulchral central passage are carved stone statues, stylized like something out of an ancient Babylonian tablet. In the distance, the steady jingling of metallic chimes and bells can be heard, suggestive of some religious rite, accompanied by a feminine voice and a song of lamentation. A muffled shambling can be heard deeper within the tomb, and various traps appear to have been laid to keep trespassers out. Or perhaps they've been placed to keep something else in. Despite the age of the tomb, the dust is disturbed in places, suggesting to our characters that there is something else in here with them. Lurking in the dark is the strange insect-like figure of a body snatcher, the remnant of a former tomb raider who, like you, delved too deep. Now twisted by the God of the Depth's influence, this thing is perhaps the first threat which our characters are unable to immediately comprehend. Its uncanny form is unlike the twisted humanoids or ancient lizard men encountered thus far. It is something else entirely, a form beyond our human mind's ability to rationalize, with the game stating that we have trouble understanding what we are seeing. But hey, at least it dies. That we can understand. Beyond the tomb, the party steps onto a walkway which overlooks a cluster of huddled structures in the shadowy distance. The silence is oppressive in its fullness, save for a distant knocking. Hey, that's the same sound from the title screen. Look how far we've come. Approaching an archway, images of recent waking nightmares are recalled with a renewed intensity. This place, they've witnessed it in their dreams. The long-lost city of the gods, Mahabra, lies before them, making good on its promise to lure our ill-fated fellowship to its primeval ingress. Parallels to Lovecraftian ancient ruins and sunken cities aside, the discovery of Mahabra serves as the turning point of Fear and Hunger's thematic expression, where the horror of the game is now entirely focused on the cosmic and the weird. With the Cube of the Depths in hand, the long-abandoned streets of the city can be explored, both in the shrouded present and in the sunlit glory of its past, revealing its purpose as a holy land created for the worship of the old gods. But the old gods have long since departed Mahabra, and have likely departed this plane of existence entirely, leaving only scant traces of their essence behind. Though humans may long for a divine caretaker figure to explain away the mysteries of the universe, the sad truth is that the old gods never cared enough about their creations to stick around, taking off on a galactic cigarette run just as soon as they became bored of their toys. In their absence, Mahabra would come to be occupied by a pantheon of new gods, ambitious mortals who made pilgrimage to the city's throne of ascension and used its powers to become divine. While these godlike beings pale in comparison to the immeasurable might of the old gods, their power nevertheless elevates them above the likes of mortal men, and their divine tenure has coincided with significant cultural and political developments throughout human history. So that's it then, right? Gods do exist, and they do care about us, right? It's a comforting delusion, to be sure, but the fact of the matter is that the new gods, despite the good intentions they carried with them as mortals, only care about themselves. Any action performed which benefits humanity is simply incidental, an unintended side effect of their ultimate goal, maintaining power. Though many of the new gods were once mortals motivated by a true desire to change the world, their ascension and the twisting of their former selves has robbed them of the meaning of their quest, revealing the trap laid for ambitious mortals by the old gods. Ascension is, for all intents and purposes, a lie. Though new gods certainly possess more physical and magical power than an ordinary person, they are just as at the mercy of the whims of fate as any mundane human. Ultimate understanding and control of the fabric of reality is out of their reach, and their powerlessness on a cosmic scale is a fact which only becomes blatantly obvious when it is far too late. A lesson the current pantheon had to learn firsthand. Of the four new gods featured in Fear and Hunger, the enlightened one, Voltaire, represents this Lovecraftian theme of cosmic insignificance most plainly. Voltaire dedicated his divine stint to the pursuit of knowledge, endeavoring to perfect the creation of artificial life which, he believed, could serve to bridge the gulf between the new gods and the old. Though his many experimentations proved to be of moderate success, his various homunculi were ultimately inadequate, failing to be anything more than crude parodies of more sophisticated life forms. After nearly 800 years of study, Voltaire concluded that true enlightenment was impossible. Humanity would never seize the reins of history and take control of their own destiny, forever condemned to be at the mercy of the old gods' influence. And the new gods would never be able to change that, let alone shake off the yoke of fate themselves. Even as an ascended new god, developing a true understanding of the cosmos and its secretive machinations would be an impossible undertaking. Whatever the true meaning of the universe may be, the limited nature of Voltaire's species will forever preclude them from quantifying it. This harrowing implication of humanity's hopelessness, having been laid bare, drove Voltaire to despair and, ultimately, suicide. The utter horror of unknowing gripped Voltaire, a being whose entire existence was to know. And the worst part? The evidence was in front of him the entire time. There was never any hope. Ascension, initially seen as an opportunity, became Voltail's singular regret. It was the avenue by which he discovered the horror of reality, ultimately leading to his abandonment of all hope. His insignificance, humanity's insignificance, would remain as part of the cosmic truth as any other natural law, a deeply Lovecraftian sentiment. Lovecraft's horror is not one of intrusion, but of realization. The world has always been implacably bleak. The horror lies in our acknowledging that fact. The new gods of the Fellowship have since their rise faded from the world. However, by traveling to the Mahabra of the past by utilizing the various beacons located throughout the deserted streets of the city, the members of the Fellowship can be encountered at the height of their power. The 4 new gods of the Fellowship, Nilvan, Ranshambara, Voltail, and Francois, must each be individually encountered and either defeated, or, in the case of Nilvan, reasoned with, to obtain their souls in order to enter the Golden Temple which houses the Throne of Ascension. Sitting upon the throne will transport the player and their party members to the Void, a realm of mystery that is impossible to return from. The Void serves as a sort of cosmic backstage, a plane referred to by the new gods as the other side of the coin. Here, the old gods were born from the green hue, a nebulous amalgam of color and concepts which acts as a sort of petri dish in which they festered and ultimately emerged from. This primeval essence permeates the Void, stretching across its seemingly endless space and overflowing from the various bottomless pits which pockmark the barren landscape. Pitiful half-formed creatures molded by the new gods wander aimlessly in the Void, forever condemned to lead the miserable lives their masters have cursed them with in their arrogant attempts to rival the old gods' creations. Several reptilian blights are here as well, taking the form of prehistoric dinosaurs such as pterodactyls and tyrannosauruses. The blights are the kin of the lizardmen encountered earlier in the game, and are believed to be their ascended forms in the realm of the Void. It would appear that humanity is not the first creation of the old gods, nor the first species to, in their ambition, pursue divinity. Perhaps Lovecraft's estimation of fear held more veracity than even he himself had figured. Fear is not just the oldest and strongest emotion of mankind. It is the oldest and strongest emotion of all kinds, motivating even the ancient lizard folk to seek answers to the infinite mysteries of the universe. Mechanically, the Void is a confusing area to navigate, and is the only looping screen in the game. Fail to stick to the correct path, and you'll find yourself doubling back on yourself in impossible ways, seemingly circumnavigating the entire region in the space of a few minutes. Though, as Ragnvalder points out, it's been at least 3 months since you've sat upon the Throne of Ascension. Time doesn't work here as one of mundane mind would expect. This true Void is something completely alien, an unplumbed cosmic mystery comparable to a distant planet. The game is no longer suspending your understanding of natural laws, it's shattering it, leaving you adrift in a sea of confusion, barely able to tell up from down, let alone understand what the hell it is you're witnessing. At all times, something is stalking you through the darkness, tracking your scent and bearing down upon you with heavy steps, each thundering advance growing louder as the thing draws closer. Your only recourse against certain death against the greater blight is to hide in one of the many holes scattered around the area, apparently dug by some other creatures which share your pitifully low rung on the food chain. It's a pretty perfect image to encapsulate the feeling of primal terror Lovecraft argued for when discussing weird fiction. A lone human huddled in a dirt hole praying to remain unseen by hungry, predatory eyes. It really doesn't get any more visceral than the archetypal image of a caveman running from a dinosaur. The dinosaurs may at first feel out of place in a game where most of the enemies resemble a violent phallus with a body attached to it. But then again, perhaps it is us humans which are out of place. Oh well, nevertheless. In order to escape the void, the player must attain godhood. Beyond the bridge which stretches over the green hue awaits the primary protagonist's reflection, a figment of their divine self which must be confronted in order for the mortal shell to ascend and leave the void. But before such a lofty seat can be taken, the guardian of the path must be overcome. From the depths, a massive squid-like shape rises, a tentacled monstrosity as green as the hue it was born in. The traces of Sylvia, old goddess of love and fertility, challenges you in an attempt to halt this ascension. Though her form is undoubtedly alien, a disturbing and uncanny resemblance to the human anatomy she is responsible for creating can be seen in her torso, which resembles the spinal structure and ribcage of a humanoid. That and the torpedo tits, I suppose. One of her primary attacks, Color of the Unknown, is a direct reference to H.P. Lovecraft's short story, The Color Out of Space. Color of the Unknown is an assault against each character's psyche, dealing heavy mind damage and making it near impossible to survive the encounter with the old god without losing one's sanity entirely. Many a Lovecraftian protagonist has come face to face with such elder things at the climax of their stories, often only to bear hopeless witness to the deaths of their comrades and the onset of their own madness. If you've ever rolled up to a Call of Cthulhu tabletop session before, you'll know this is pretty par for the course for any encounter with an elder god. Though Sylvian cannot be killed, strictly speaking, surviving long enough will earn her mercy, or perhaps her pity, allowing us to advance beyond the bridge towards our final encounter, and our final crushing revelation. Ultimately, there is no escape from the dungeons of fear and hunger, at least, not in any recognizable state. Beyond the bridge Sylvian so closely guarded, the selfish reflection of your primary protagonist awaits in their ascended form. A series of choices will be presented to the player, each expanding upon their reign as a new god and the impacts their decisions will have on the world. Regardless of the choices made, the player will be consigned to the darkness of the void for all time, and their godly self will return to the surface to reign over the ignorant flock of man, ensuring the continuation of the cycle of servitude established by the old gods. But the void is not the only end our adventure can take us to. Two other endings remain, and they take place outside of the void, requiring the player to seek out the writhing purple hearts found throughout the game. We've already come across one near Lagarde's cell, and there are two remaining organs left to be found elsewhere. After destroying the organs and returning to the Cavedweller village, the god of the depths can be found, this time with mouth agape. How inviting! Entering the old god's mouth leads the party into a gauntlet, fraught with traps and monsters more dire than anything seen up until this point. Believe me, this shit sucks. Top-down JRPGs are not the best suited for these kinds of platforming Twitch reaction sections, and you're likely gonna get bifurcated a half dozen times before you get the hang of it and manage to navigate the gauntlet to the end. When you finally do come out the other side, you'll find yourself atop a heap of bodies, their uncountable faces twisted in horror. This bridge of corpses leads to a dead end overlooking the eternal darkness of the god of the depths' cavernous body. From the abyss ascends the terrible traces of Grogorath, the old god of destruction. As if to drive home the unfathomable power of the old gods further, this simple trace of Grogorath is enough to instantly annihilate Nosferatu should he be in your party, further illustrating the power gap between the new gods and the old. As a primordial deity, this boss fight is pretty brutal, and his various spells and the might of his physical attacks can prove devastating to the unready. Naturally, your mortal party members have no chance of winning, and can only hope to survive long enough to pique the old god's curiosity. Intrigued by your struggle, Grogaroth offers to reveal the scant traces of the true fabric of reality to you. Though in doing so, your feeble human mind is shattered by the incomprehensible revelations, your body's functions shutting down one by one as you draw your last panicked breaths in the dungeons of fear and hunger. Talk about an unbearable truth. Should you instead reach the depths with the girl in your party, you will not encounter the traces of Grogaroth. Instead, the girl will collapse to the floor, overtaken by a fit of convulsions as her ascension begins. The girl, the offspring of the new god Nilvan and the mercenary captain Lagarde, carries the soul of the Ancient, which had been lying dormant within her this entire time. The horrors she's experienced firsthand within the dungeons filled her life with an incomparable sadness and despair. Knowing only fear and hunger, the girl ascends, rapidly mutating into an avatar which embodies those concepts. Unlike the ascended mortals which sat upon the throne in Mahabra, the girl's ascension is something grander in scale, and her power rivals that of the old gods. And, as with the old gods, you have no hope in this fight. You can only watch in terror as the birth of the god of fear and hunger ushers humanity into a new era, which will come to be known as the Cruel Age. All of these endings, whether you escape the dungeon or not, are quick to remind you of the folly of your adventure. Should you perish in the dungeon's depths, you vanish from existence, erased from history and resigned to ultimate obscurity and oblivion. Should you return, there is no celebration or heroic fanfare awaiting you. Those outside of the dungeon's walls will never understand nor care about what you've gone through. And with Lagarde's death, or his ascension in the prophecy ending, there is no reward to show for your struggles. The only thing your character has gained is a deeper knowledge of the dark world which lies hidden away from humanity's ignorant eyes. And the revelations of humanity's hopelessness will, as with Voltaire in Lovecraft's many narrator protagonists, drive them further and further into madness with each passing day. It's a deeply cosmicist tone to take with the game's conclusion, the results of your efforts having either been forgotten or never properly attributed to your sacrifices. What you've done, what you've been through, has no bearing on the world at large, let alone the universe beyond it. Humanity will remain ignorant of its feeble place on this placid isle of ignorance amidst the black seas of the infinite and horrifying unknown. Whatever warnings you could provide would do naught to change reality, assuming of course they are not immediately dismissed as the ravings of a lunatic. If you're stuck wondering what the point of it all was, or if there was ever any meaning in the first place, know that as humans we wouldn't be able to identify it even if it was right in front of us. Cosmicism does not preclude the existence of meaning. It simply precludes humans from understanding that meaning. That about does it for the game's primary endings. There are 4 remaining character-exclusive endings which can only be achieved by completing the game on hard mode, but they're all more or less happy endings which serve as more of a feel-good bonus for your accomplishments rather than adding any additional cosmic dread. Besides, this video is already long enough by my estimation. We don't need to get into Ragnvaldr's transformation into Doom Guy right now. If you're a fan of Fear and Hunger, I hope you found some food for thought in this examination of the game through the lens of cosmic horror. If you've never heard of this shit before, I'm sorry? But hey, if you're thinking of checking out the game for yourself, I can confidently tell you that this game sucks. It's mechanically frustrating, unintuitive, genuinely miserable to play, and I couldn't recommend it to anyone I know in good conscience. 10 out of 10. Flip a coin or something, I don't know. This isn't the kind of thing you dive into to have a good time. It's very much a games as art type of experience, which seeks to be engaging and thought-provoking more so than actually enjoyable or fun. If you want to shoot some guns and swing some swords, go play something else. Have fun. Call your mom. Smile. Do happy people shit. I don't know. But if you're the type of person that considers Grave of the Fireflies a fun Sunday night watch in between sessions with your audiobook copy of Blood Meridian, check out Fear and Hunger. It'll scratch that paradoxical desire for tragedy masochists like you and I enjoy bludgeoning ourselves with. Might be a good idea for a future video, in all honesty. Thanks for watching. I'm still pretty new to this whole thing, and this video is a part of my ongoing experimentation with YouTube and the medium. I don't intend to abandon video essays surrounding folklore, fantasy, and D&D, so if you're looking forward to more stuff like that, it's coming. I'll probably fuck about with some more casual, less academic stuff like this video, but you can keep an eye out for more deep dives into fantasy fiction tropes. If you liked what you saw here today, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, all that end of video cringe shit. I do genuinely appreciate it. Cheers, and see you next time.